Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted less stress and a deeper night's sleep, then do we have the Stand Like Mountain, Flow Like Water show for you. Today I'll be talking with Brian Luke-Seward, stress management expert, the producer of a stunningly beautiful documentary, Earth Songs, and the author of at least 16 or more books, including a life-transforming, stress-reducing book, Stand Like Mountain, Flow Like Water, and a beautiful book on sleep, A Good Night's Sleep. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about getting our stress way down to get our sleep way up. That, plus we'll talk about a zombie apocalypse, sleep robbers, gotcha, counting sheep, 26 years in bed, The Sound of Music, psychotic DJs and Toyotas, and what in the world kitty cats and baseball bats have to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Luke. Are you ready to shine?
Hey, Michael, I sure am. Glad to be here. Thank you very much.
So glad to have you here. Before we dive right into things, what does The Sound of Music have to do with anything?
It was very inspirational for me as a kid to see that movie. And as someone who's been teaching stress management now for, close to 40 years, I realized that there was so much stress management in this movie. There was music therapy. There was positive affirmations, my favorite things. There was the healing power of prayer. There was support groups. I mean, almost every coping technique and relaxation technique I could think of was in this movie. And of course, all done so well. It's classic. I think it was successful for a great number of reasons, but I realized that that movie actually had a very profound impact on my life and my career. little did I know at the time, but looking back, yes, very much so.
Where'd you grow up and what were your stress levels like growing up?
I grew up in New England. I'm actually from Connecticut, a town called Glastonbury, which is across the river from the Connecticut River from Hartford.
Yep.
It was a very small agricultural town at the time in the 60s and 70s. And I was raised by two abusive alcoholic parents, so I know stress pretty well back then. And it was a difficult time. I pretty much thought that I had the worst life possible until I got to college and then met other people who had worse lives than me. And that was when I realized it was important to let go of the label of victim and then get on with my life.
So growing up with those parents, this kind of short circuits everything or jumps over everything, and we're going to jump back around. When we talk about stress and the brain, and we go to fight, flight, or freeze, you were experiencing all of it growing up, weren't you?
I was, yeah, sure was. It's kind of funny, I escaped the stress by going out in the forest, my backyard, much like Maria von Trapp did, going up into the hills. So I think she was an inspiration for me. But I know stress quite well as a child and as a teenager. Very difficult times, regardless of what your parental background is. But this was just layers upon layers of stress on top of that. And so I don't know if you know much about the whole aspect of children of alcoholics, but a lot of times what we do is we keep our mouth shut so that we can live to see tomorrow. When you keep your mouth shut, you're always observing. And so I became an observer of behavior, which also led to my background in psychology.
Now, was psychology your first choice? Were you thinking, I want to help other people with this? Or at that point, is it me search? I want to help myself with this.
Yeah, good question. Mostly research. I was trying to survive. I went to the University of Maine, got a degree in journalism, although I love sports, and so I double majored in a field now called kinesiology, but back then it was phys ed. And I really had a great interest. I was very much inspired by Mark Spitz, because back then he won, I think, 7 gold medals in the 72 Olympics. And after seeing him do this, I went out for the swim team, and exercise became my passion as well. But I love sports, and I thought I might go down the path of being a sports psychologist. And so I kept that in the back of my mind, and actually ended up doing that. I was a sports psychologist for the Olympic Biathlon Association when I lived in Vermont for a number of years. And this is the Calgary Olympics. And for those people who don't know, biathlon is a sport that's a combination of cross-country skiing and shooting. I call it the James Bond sport. And my job as a sports psychologist was to teach the athletes at a very amazing caliber level how to relax so they could actually shoot a target and not have their rifle aimed someplace else because their heart rate was going so fast. So I taught mental imagery, taught confidence building, taught relaxation, taught team dynamics too. And the team did pretty well. We never got a gold medal that year, but we did pretty well. And then after that, I decided to go back into academia. I love teaching, so I took a job back down in the D.C. area at the American University in D.C., where I taught stress management.
It's fascinating. There's so many different directions we can go. First off, it's one of my favorite sports to think about, not necessarily to participate in, but I used to be known anyway for running around with a camera all over the place. And so I would run in the middle of winter, snowshoes, anything, and then you have to pause on a moment's notice and still yourself to be able to get an image. And these guys are going full speed cross-country skiing, which is like highest heart output possible, and then have to shoot not only in between breaths, but if I understand correctly, in between heartbeats.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it was amazing. And a good part of my life was doing that, and very, very wonderful memories. When I went down to DC, I ended up doing some more work with Olympic athletes from the swim team and from the ice skating world, and so that followed me there. And then, of course, now I do it for corporate America, and to be honest with you, anybody who's stressed, because everyone seems to benefit from it.
Talking about stress, taking you from Connecticut. And I grew up in a little town, Danvers, Massachusetts, so not too far away, just by Salem, Massachusetts, the same kind of area. So just outside of Boston. You went from Connecticut, you went to Vermont, I understand this. You went to DC, and I'm wondering what happened to your stress levels, because sooner or later you boomerang to the Rockies.
Yeah, there's a few other legs in the journey there, but I went to graduate school after the University of Maine to the University of Illinois, and got a degree in the physiology of exercise back in the late 70s. And at that point there, all of a sudden my interest shifted to cardiac rehabilitation. That was a real big thing back at that time period. And so I then went from Illinois up to Wisconsin for a year, taking a job as associate director of a cardiac rehab program. And I hated it. And I hated the medical profession. There was a lot of arrogance there. I didn't like the fact that people were dying on me. I went there to try and save them, and they were dying with heart disease. So I thought maybe I should get out of rehabilitation and go into prevention, or what is now known as health promotion. So after that job, I went to Colorado for a ski trip and decided to stay, as a lot of happens to a lot of people out here. Fell in love with the mountains. I felt like I was home. But after a couple of years working at the YMCA here in Boulder County, decided to head back to graduate school, which then led me to the University of Maryland, where I created my own degree program. At the time, it was very, very special to do that. Now it's more common, but I decided I wanted to look at the integration, balance, and harmony of mind, body, spirit, emotions. And so I created my own program, which is now called health psychology, but back then they didn't know what to call it, psychophysiology. And so, and some people called it psychoneuroimmunology. But that was where I got a real good handle on how to teach stress management. I've been teaching before, but then this was not part of my studies. And so between that and doing work with sports psychology, it was a magical alchemy that's proven to be very valuable for my career.
I love it. And in many ways, we've gone down very similar paths. And at Colorado College a long time ago, I was trying to make a degree at that point in exercise physiology, because I loved visual and I wanted to do the full works. There was, it was Breath Play I was reading back then, and one of the earliest books on sports psychology. I can't even remember it. I wanted to use all the visualization techniques, which many years later would lead me to meditation. How did you get interested in meditation?
Well, I found that swimming in high school and college, you can't really talk to anybody for 2 hours. So it was a great time to expand my mind and also problem solve. Like swimming for me was a time to problem solve. So in high school and college, then when I got done with college, I kept swimming, been swimming ever since then, but I also took up running and even some triathlons. But when I went to the American University, I taught stress management, and I went to a Buddhist meditation retreat center, and I learned a different type of meditation. And I thought, this is very beneficial in a different way than sticking your head in the water for 2 hours swimming laps. So I did the proverbial lotus position and closed my eyes and focused my breathing. And after several weeks, I had some major epiphanies and some major insights I never would have gotten from swimming. And by the way, I got to tell you, when I did swim, you do solve a lot of problems, but you've got no means to write them down. And so I get out of the locker room and I'm like, oh, how did I solve that problem? So I had to work on memory issues too. But anyway, meditation, I would say I began in earnest in the proverbial sense of sitting quietly with your legs folded and arms and such. Back in 1988. So, about 30 years ago or so. It's wonderful. I mean, there's lots of ways to meditate. We can definitely talk about that because that also relates to, getting a good night's sleep. In fact, some of the earliest research I ever came across, Michael, was showed that people who meditate sleep better than those people who don't. And of course, the same research shows people who exercise in terms of their cardiovascular system sleep better than those who don't. And so in the back of my head, I was putting those two together thinking like, somewhere there's a connection here and I'm going to find it.
Very cool. So let's segue from there then right into your connection. 2005, how did you get interested specifically in sleep?
Well, out here in Colorado, I left the American University in 93 and moved back to Colorado here because I figured this was home and I'm going to make it home. And so I do three things here. I teach part-time, I do public speaking, and I write books. And I got a phone call if I would come to this one corporation and speak about health promotion, but specifically about insomnia and stress. And I got to tell you, Michael, that I sleep really good at night. So I said yes to them. I said, I better do some homework, some research. And so I began to call some information and realize that over half of Americans don't sleep well at all on a regular basis. And I thought to myself, this should be headline news. Forget Kim Kardashian or Paris Hilton. This is important stuff, and no one's talking about it. And so this wellness program said, we normally get about 10 to 15 people, so don't be expecting a big crowd. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to have me set my sights a little lower. They had over 100 people at this high-tech company in Boulder show up, and they said they didn't have room for them all, so I ended up doing 2 sessions. But what it showed me was that sleep and insomnia is truly a big concern. And this, by the way, was before the real big use of cell phones and iPads. So I knew that once that happened, we were really onto something. But I give a number of talks on stress, but that one actually was very, very popular, not just here in Colorado, but pretty much around the country here. I gave a couple of talks at conferences, and one was a good night's sleep. And people said, hey, would you come here? Would you come there? And that led to, of course, the book, A Good Night's Sleep, too.
Beautiful. So talking about a good night's sleep, let's actually talk about the flip side of that coin. How does a lack of sleep affect us? Because in the old days, and it's actually still continuing today, although starting to get a little better, less sleep was a badge of honor. But how is it hurting us?
Well, in a number of ways. For a longest time, Michael, no one really knew why we slept. We do a third of our lives in this position and this activity, and no one really gave much thought to it until they began to have problems not getting sleep. And it turns out that what happens when you don't get sleep, you have bad memory. Let's take a look at things mentally. Bad memory, bad performance in terms of reaction time, bad decision making, poor communication skills. This sounds like half of America, right? But it also turns out that we now know that not getting a good night's sleep definitely affects your immune system. And when the immune system is compromised, then you're more prone for things like cancer, heart disease, even things like obesity. And then we also found out just recently, the past couple of years, this one woman was kind of curious why we have these brain cells called glial cells. Yeah. And no one ever really knew what they were used for. She had the brilliant idea to think, what happens when you're sleeping? Maybe they're doing something then, because they couldn't figure out what they were used for. And it turns out that glial cells act like vacuum cleaners in your brain, and they clean up these things called amyloids or waste products. And we now know people who have a lot of amyloids in their brain tissue are prone for Alzheimer's. So not getting a good night's sleep on a regular basis not only affects short-term memory, short-term mental processing, but we're now seeing long-term as well. But we also see that not getting a good night's sleep affects the human spirit too. People just they're rude, they're cranky, they're irritable, they're uncivil. We're seeing a lot of that in the world today as well. Not just related to sleep, but that's a part of it.
Well, it seems like the fight or flight mechanism is completely revved up on high, because when you're not getting enough sleep, what you want to do is crawl into a cave and hide. And if you instead have to interact with others and you're wanting to protect yourself and shut down, it's a difficult mix.
It's huge. It really is huge. And we have so many distractions right now. And, in your wonderful opening introduction, you talked about time robbers. And I never really even knew what the expression was until I started doing some research on sleep and sleep deprivation and insomnia. But time robbers are things that basically steal away our ability to get a good night's sleep. And the biggest one we have today, and I want to preface this by saying I love technology, but the biggest problem we have today is the addiction to screen devices. Mm-hmm. Everything from smartphones to iPads to TVs as well. They're screens as well. And what they're really doing is having a huge detrimental impact on our overall health, but specifically our ability to sleep through the compromising of the pineal gland's ability to make melatonin, the sleep hormone.
We're going to dive back around and we're going to talk about melatonin a little bit. I can't resist talking about this topic though, because it relates to me to time to sleep robbers. It relates to our dumbing down of ourselves when we're not getting enough sleep, among other things. 70s DJs and sleep psychosis.
Yeah, I was fascinated with this because I remember going to college, and there was this car company called Toyota. They're still around, and they were doing this promotion back in the University of Maine area. I think it was maybe Bangor, Maine, where the expression back then was "put your hands on a Toyota and never let go." Mm-hmm. And so they had this contest with all these people to see who could touch this car, and the last person standing would win the car. And this happened over a couple of days. But they noticed that the people who were dropping off after the second day, they were showing signs of psychosis. At the same time, I was thinking back to the early 70s, maybe the late 60s, where some of the DJs would do these marathons where they would stay on the air, not just for 8 hours, but they'd do it 24, 36 hours. And the whole concept didn't last very long, because at some point, these people who were on the air began to speak very incoherently, which is not what you want for a DJ in a radio station. And they were showing signs of psychosis, complete hallucinations, all kinds of things. And so this whole idea of the fact that by not getting a good night's sleep, you are truly affecting your mental cognition. But the good news with this is that when they were allowed to sleep, then the signs of psychosis disappeared. I wish it was that easy for people who really have that problem. But so anyway, the idea was you want to keep your mental faculties aware and functioning properly, driving, on the radio, your job, whatever the case might be there. And sleep deprivation is not the way to go. In fact, Michael, sleep deprivation is one of the forms of torture. And we talk about waterboarding, but sleep deprivation is the number one form of torture that people use over the past, I don't know how many hundreds, if not, thousands of years. It's still going on today, I might add.
Wow. There was a study I read recently, and I wish I could recall which it was. Something to do with 7 or even 7.5 hours. I'm going to say maybe 7 hours of sleep a night for a week. And at that point, your reaction time becomes as if you're drunk.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And to add to that, they now know that people who text while driving show the same kind of impairment as if they're drunk driving.
Fascinating. And it was from your book, A Good Night's Sleep, that I had to go doing research on some of these train accidents that happened because of the conductors texting. It makes sense if drivers are texting. Now we've got conductors texting. Hopefully exactly. The pilots, at least, and Jessica is flying as we're speaking right now. Hopefully the pilots have put their cell phones away.
Hopefully. But there was one incident a couple of years ago. Some Delta pilots missed their airport. They were supposed to arrive into, I think it was Detroit, and they got to New York State and realized they had made a mistake and had to come back because they were on their computers. It sounds kind of comical, except for that when lives are at stake, it's not funny at all. It's horrible. In fact, one person dying from this is way too many. So, train wrecks, not a good sign.
So let's transition from train wrecks to telomeres. What can you tell us about telomeres in sleep?
At the end of each of our DNA strands are are called telomeres. They're kind of like shoelaces at the end of your shoestrings. And stress can definitely shorten the telomere quality. And telomeres are used for the replication of DNA strands. And so you want to have good telomeres at the end of each of your DNA strands. But stress is one way in which the ends begin to fray. When the ends fray, then the DNA strands can't replicate themselves. And when you don't have good replication of DNA, then you begin to have things like malignant cells and cancerous tumors and all kinds of other problems. So telomeres really are thought to be some of the newest research right now in terms of health. In fact, a woman who did the primary research in this won a Nobel Prize in Medicine, I think like 3 years ago. I forget her name, but she has a great book on this as well. And so maybe we can try and dig that up somewhere in the break. I forgot her name. Sorry about that. There goes my memory. But I got a good night's sleep last night.
I love it. So on that note, if we want to lose weight and be in the best shape of our lives, fitness and weight loss, which is more important, stressing out over our diet or getting a good night's sleep?
Getting a good night's sleep. Getting a good night for sure. Yeah. I was astonished to learn that so much of poor sleep affects the immune system. And Michael, I got to tell you that I read on a couple different places that over half of Americans are walking around with a suppressed immune system. And my concern about stress is the stress and disease connection. Back when I was in graduate school, we're talking like the mid to late 70s, I was taught that about the stress and disease connection was actually kind of laughed at, but I was taught that about 50% of all disease and illness is thought to be stress related, and that they said that was a very high estimate. Now, research shows that about 80 to 85% of all disease and illness is thought to be stress related, and they say that's a conservative estimate. So, chronic health definitely is affected by chronic stress. There's no chronic disease, I should say, is affected by chronic stress. There's no disputing this whatsoever. And so, yes, eating is important. I'm a real big fan of healthy eating. I taught nutrition. I'm not sure you know this or not, but I taught nutrition at the University of Colorado for 12 years. Wow. And I learned a lot. But if you don't get a good night's sleep, basically you're a zombie. And most likely, if you're not getting a good night's sleep, you're not going to eat well either. They go hand in hand, but a third of your life is sleeping. So we got to pay attention to that. And most people, they shave off an hour in the front or the back watching something on their screen devices. And pretty soon they're getting not 7, but 5 or maybe 4 hours sleep. And kids, oh my God, back when you and I were growing up, we had comic books and flashlights. Today, kids have screen devices. And we now know that kids' brains don't fully develop until age 25. So they're out of college already. And by not getting a good night's sleep, we're causing some serious problems with brain development too.
So let's talk about brain development for a minute. And actually, since we're talking about metabolism and sleep, so we're going to stay on this diet side of things for a minute, because there are people who, first off, if you stay up late, you get the munchies. Basically, your hormones for being hungry go up, your hormones for being satiated go down, and you want fatty foods.
Yeah, what a lot of people don't realize is that there's a wonderful balance between melatonin and serotonin. Melatonin is a sleep hormone. It's made in the pineal gland. Pineal gland is this tiny, tiny, almost like the size of a raisin, smack in the center of your head. And this is what runs the body clock. And there's some research that suggests that melatonin actually is formed by the breaking down of serotonin. Serotonin is thought to be the happy hormone, one of the happy hormones. We've got dopamine too. But serotonin is used for all kinds of things, but it's also used to it's related to emotions and carbohydrates. People who tend to eat carbohydrates tend to have more serotonin. So people who eat before they go to bed, maybe like they have a gallon of ice cream or a box of Oreo cookies or God knows what cereal. I think college students do the cereal thing. Some things never change, by the way. What they're basically doing is jacking up the serotonin levels. And that's the last thing you want to do to get a good night's sleep. By about 8 o'clock, you should be thinking, if you go to bed at 10, that you should not be trying to sabotage the production of melatonin. Yet a lot of people do that.
And on that note, when you eat, your body temperature goes up, and we need it to cool down, don't we, in order to sleep?
Exactly. Yeah. It's a whole concept called sleep hygiene. And what it basically means is, what is the environment like where you sleep? And it should be a cool environment because, again, the body temperature goes down. You want to make sure that you're not overheated, because if you are, then that's going to affect melatonin production and just overall sleep quality. You want to make sure you don't have a lot of light. because light is going to affect the optic nerve. Even if your eyes are closed, the pineal gland can sense this because it has directions to the optic nerve. In fact, they now know, Michael, that the pineal gland has rods and cones. So just like you have in your eyes, the pineal gland is that third eye. There's a reason why they call it that. Sleep environment also includes things like a noise or lack thereof. People who actually hear a lot of noise, it affects their sleep as the quality as well. And go back to light for a second. I saw this article in National Geographic magazine about city lights, and we have so much light pollution. It is crazy. If you take a look at a Landsat photograph of the United States, it's like from the Mississippi to the East Coast is like a Christmas tree lit up, every night like that. And so you want to make sure that you have a nice, dark, cool, quiet environment to sleep. But I also want to put a plug in for some good bedding too, because I've been at some people's houses, and I got to tell you, you spend a third of your life sleeping, you should have nothing less than 1,000 count sheets. And I know some people who are like hovering between 20 and 30, and that's like sandpaper. So you want to get good bedding. You want to get down pillows. You want to get down comforters. I got to tell you a funny story, Michael. I went out to this conference, and it's a Fortune 500 conference out in L.A. I was put up at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, and the bedding was incredible. I had the best night's sleep ever. This was like about 30 years ago. And I got home, and I took a look at my bed, and I thought, we're going to make some changes. So I called up the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, and I said, can you put me in touch with people who actually purchased the pillows and the comforters and sheets? And they said, oh yes, that's I think her name was Phyllis at the time. Turns out this was her sole job, was to answer phone calls like mine and give people out the information of where to find this stuff. My bed is awesome now, and everyone's bed should be awesome, because you spend a third of your life doing this. Why wouldn't you want to sleep like a king or a queen in bed?
So this is going to lead to a very crazy tangent, and we're going to see how we pull this back on track. We started looking for a better mattress for Jessica and myself because she's pregnant now. And in our research for mattresses, we couldn't find almost any modern mattress, unless you leave it outside for a few years, that's not made with petroleum products that are off-gassing, unless you go with something that's our thing in the future. We're going to fill these bags with, buckwheat or something, and literally go that method. Because the modern mattresses, you're spending 6, 7, 8 hours a night on something that, yes, they say air it out for a few days after you get it, but it's still off-gassing after you get it.
I know. We got some problems with that. Also, I got to tell you, I am not a big fan of any kind of electrical cords coming in or out of beds too, because of the whole ELF thing. And let me just explain to your listeners that ELF stands for extremely low frequency, or microwaves. And there's a wonderful book I would recommend to all the listeners here. It's called Cross Currents. It was written by a guy named William Becker. He's a physician who has passed away since the book came out. But it turns out that, and this book came out before cell phones, I might add too, just to show you. But it's all about dirty electricity. And one of the things that to me should have been headline news in this book was that 69% of women who sleep with an electric blanket who are pregnant will miscarry. That is huge. And what the message was, that you don't want anything electrical in your space, because it's going to affect your own energy levels. And so they say you sure as heck don't want your digital phone under your pillow. Go back to an analog alarm clock. You don't want even the TV in the room, and you don't want cords and things coming out of the bed, because that's going to affect your human energy field. So I talk about this thing called digital toxicity. But there's a whole other layer of the toxicity, which is the ELFs, or the microwaves that are in our bedrooms, that's also negating good sleep hygiene.
Do you actually he has these plugs that you can put into the wall to negate dirty electricity. Do you use those yourself?
I do. And probably the best advice I can give in this whole interview is put your Wi-Fi router on a power strip and turn it off at nighttime. You don't need the Wi-Fi when you sleep, but there's a great documentary. It sounds like a mixed message here, but a great documentary I saw on YouTube, and it's called Resonance: Beings of Frequency. And you can see it for free. You can download the movie for free, or watch it for free. And they show all the research being done with Wi-Fi routers and cell phones, and how it affects the production of melatonin in the brain. And Wi-Fi routers emit a vibration that suppresses the pineal gland's ability to make melatonin. Again, that should be headline news, but not many people hear about this. So I've had countless people who've been to my sleep presentations say to me afterwards, I did one thing, like you said, I turned off the Wi-Fi router, and I sleep so much better now. And I'm like, great. If that's all you get out of this talk, then I've done my job. But yeah, so I not only have I done what you mentioned, I also turn off the Wi-Fi router so that there's a minimal amount of microwaves going through the house, hence my head while I'm sleeping.
I love it. We've got one Wi-Fi router we shut off whenever it's not in use. The other one's buried in the basement. But you motivated me after reading your book today. I said, I have talked about doing this in past houses. I could go Wi-Fi free. This one I couldn't figure out. We've got cords going every which way with the show. But to get an outlet or vacation timer. And so I put one in my Amazon shopping cart while reading your book this morning, because then I can have it pop and go off when it's time to go to bed. And it'll come on when I need to get up and get something done in the morning if I need to be on a Wi-Fi plugged in unit. But then I have none of that ELF going on. And then another one that I've noticed is, if you can't get the electronics out, do not just put them to sleep. They're still emitting.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, you mentioned before we got on here not to hold back. So, okay, I'm going to tell you a story. This is in the category of cosmic gossip here, but I belong to a group of professionals who study the human energy field. And these are physicists, they're physicians, they're nurses, and they're energy healers. They do Reiki, healing touch, Qigong, and things. Well, back in 1991, I was invited to attend a conference, and then I got a chance to speak at it afterwards. But one of the healers, and she's long gone now, but this is back, almost 30 years ago. Her name was Ethel Lombardi, and she was a short woman with fiery red hair, and she was a energy healer and a psychic. And I was living in DC. I wanted to get out. I was going to move to Colorado. And I said to her, Ethel, I said, do cities have auric fields like people have auric fields? And she says, oh, they most certainly do. And she goes, if I were you, she goes, I would not live in DC. And I said, I do live in DC. And she said, get out. And then she walked away. And then she turned around. This is unsolicited, Michael. She turned around and said to me, oh, yeah, one more thing. She goes, if you have a TV in your bedroom, unplug it before you go to bed at night. And I said, well, Ethel, I said, I don't have a TV. I said, I don't watch TV. I said, but why do you say that? And she said, because vibrations come through the TV, even when it's turned off, that negate the energy fields, the people's energy fields. And then she walked away again. It was kind of like, in passing. And I thought to myself, holy cow. Then I did some research about who invented the television as we know it today. And a guy named Farnsworth in America was the American inventor, and he was working on this concept. And then this guy in Russia, whose name I don't remember, was also working on this concept. And the two of them came together at a conference, and someone said, you two should get together and come together with this idea you have. And together they invented the television as we know it. And Michael, once it was invented as a commercial product, neither one of them allowed it in their house.
So now I'm going to go even further down the rabbit hole. I can't believe we're going here. I had one before. I'm going to need to buy one. I've got my hands right now. They're firmly on my earthing mat as we're speaking, so that I'm plugged into the ground as we're talking. And I've had in the past, and you talked about cities, a tri-field recorder, a device that you can measure the EMF that's coming out, or magnetic waves as well. It does like 7 different readings of the electricity in your house. And I remember being in Gloucester, Mass., my dad's hometown. I'm in his office, and this thing is going nuts. And it was going nuts by his radiator. And then I followed it down to the pipes, and it turns out that the pipes in the city were emitting electrical fields, something to do with maybe them not being properly grounded.
Wow.
And so we get to look at, how can we connect to the earth? How can we make a cleanest electrical space or electricity-free space? What can we do to get some of this stuff out? We don't want to get too worried where we stress ourselves out, but It's real. Surrounding ourselves in the soup, we get to do what we can to help. So what do? You've got plugs in your house for dirty electricity. I'm assuming you're using grounding things as well. Maybe not. What are you doing so that you can have more of a electricity-free sanctuary? For instance, you and I both know when we go camping, how great do we feel when we go to sleep at night?
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah, because you're what you're doing is you're resyncing your body's energies, circadian rhythms they call them, with the earth energies. And I came across an interesting bit of information. We breathe about 12 to 14 times per minute. That's the typical normal cycle, but that's also the same number of times the ocean waves hit the shore, not when it's not stormy or whatever. So there's a whole idea about the natural rhythms of the earth, and so like you, I get out in nature every day. I walk my dog out in the woods. I go up hiking in the mountains, but I feel very important to stay grounded. And we can make all the jokes you want about hugging a tree, but there's something to be said about actually
hugging a tree.
Hugging a tree, yes, yeah, and being in sync with the vibrations of nature, because we're not designed to be hooked up to electronics 24 hours a day. Yet there are some people who are like that, and we haven't even talked about the addiction process yet. We're going to need a few more hours for this interview, or part 2 and 3. But it is amazing that there's such a problem with the addiction process and the dirty energy, if you will. So I don't get stressed about it, because that's part of where we are right now. But my whole point is how to live in balance and to get outside in nature, leave all the technology behind. There's a whole concept called earthing too, where you walk barefoot on the earth. I just came back from a trip to Aruba. I was speaking at a conference down there, and I walked the beach quite a bit barefoot, just to kind of get that sense of grounding. And it really helps also with jet lag too.
So let's go from there. Let's talk about addiction. Then I want to dive into melatonin. I'll guide us along through this. But you were talking about how marketers realized that they could tweak how shows are made to get us to be sucked into the blue light.
Yeah. I would recommend everyone who hears this to Google 60 Minutes with Anderson Cooper, and the section you want to see is called Brain Hacking. And Anderson Cooper goes out to California to interview a number of people who actually create video games, and they hire these psychologists, which is, we won't even go there on that one, but they hire these people to basically hook the viewer into watching and not turning off their computer. So there's a whole level of this, and the addiction process. I mean, there's the ego involved with social media, that you want to actually have connections and such. But there's also a brain chemistry addiction as well, with dopamine. They now know that when your phone goes off, you get a little squirt of dopamine in your brain, and dopamine is the neurotransmitter associated with the addictions of drugs and alcohol and such.
Ding.
Yeah, exactly. And Michael, they also have found out that dopamine squirts come out if you think your phone goes off but doesn't. They call them phantom rings. There's a wonderful book about this by Sherry Turkle called Alone Together. And she talks about the fact that she thought technology was going to be incredible until she realized the problems with it. And by the way, I want to mention one more book by Deborah Davis called Disconnect, all about the ELFs. That goes back a few moments in the conversation. But yeah, so we have a problem with addiction to screens. Again, it's part of our technology. It's never going to go away. So the real important message is healthy boundaries. And that I think we all need to have a closer look at here. But in terms of the addiction process, I want people to realize it's not just a psychological addiction. It's not just a physiological addiction. It's a hybrid of those two coming together. And whenever you've got the ego involved, it's a tough nut to crack for stress, because the ego pulls a stress fight or flight switch, and in some cases it just keeps yanking it all day long.
So I didn't mean to be picking on all electronics, all of this interview, but since we're going ego and we're going addiction, and man, you have something in there. I want to talk about social media and divorces as well.
Yeah, well, how much time do we have? First of all, I got to tell you a little story about that. I was on a vacation. I'm trying to think where I was. And this person said, I said, where are you from? They said, Canada. And I said, oh, Canada. I said, I love Canada. And they said, you won't believe the news I just heard today. And I said, wow, what's going on in Canada? And they said that something like 30% of people would rather be on their smartphones than have sex with their spouses. And I thought to myself, if it's 30% in Canada, it's probably like 80% in the United States.
Do we call this population control? You're on the phone so much that you're no longer doing it?
Yeah. Well, they found that with kids, that they say that kids, teenagers, are their exposure to how should I say this politely here? Coming of age is later now because of social media. Kids are, and also they're not getting their driver's licenses. They'd rather just take Uber rides somewhere, which is really having an impact on car sales and the economy. But that's a whole other stressor right there.
Well, hey, I actually, how do I put this? Maybe if kids are so much into their electronics, it's good they're not on the road yet.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, yeah. There's benefits to all this stuff, and again, don't want to really poo-poo technology. I wrote my books on my Apple computer. I use my Apple computer to do my slide presentations. I love Keynote. I love my MP3 player where I can listen to my Apple music because I love it. I love music. But as a joke goes, you don't take it to bed with you.
Yeah, and this show wouldn't exist without all of this technology. There's no way. Now, we've discussed it, smartphone free. I did for a while. This year, I actually got a camera phone. I never actually set it up with the carrier. I just used it as a camera. And then we need a new phone for Jessica. So she now has that. And I'm back to my little thing here because when I'm plugged in, I want to be plugged in. But then I want the time to be bored. I want the time to not have stimulus, to wind down the nervous system, to be able to get in touch with myself and what matters most. And then I'm not as revved up to sleep at night.
Yeah, exactly. The word that comes to mind as you're saying this, which is a really good point, is neuroplasticity. It's the big buzzword right now in stress management and also stress physiology, I suppose. But neuroplasticity is how we wire our brain. And going back to my time with the Olympic athletes, these athletes would wire their brain for competition. Gross motor skills, fine motor skills, but that was all about trying to work your brain in terms of performance. And what we see right now is the idea of neuroplasticity with cell phone use. And there's a couple of researchers, one of which is Susan Greenfield out in England, who talks about the fact that kids who are on their devices 8 hours a day are wiring their brain for stress. Now, we've heard the term neuroplasticity for meditation and the whole idea of mindfulness, which is a great antidote to this digital toxicity. But again, we have a whole generation of kids who've never known life without a cell phone or smartphone. And so they really have wired themselves for the stress response. And what I typically say is that you can't be in stress mode all the time. If you are, you're going to end up having some serious health issues. Everything from the common cold to cancer has been researched, everything from herpes to hemorrhoids.
We're going to go into mindfulness in just a second. Before we do that, let's talk about melatonin supplements, and even quote unquote sleep aids.
Yeah, great question. So I am just an N of one, and I would always say, as they say, check with your doctor, or I'm going to say your healthcare practitioner, because a lot of doctors don't know this stuff. In fact, a lot of doctors prescribe sleep aids willy-nilly, and that's really problematic. Let me just tell you something real quickly here. When I wrote the book on good night's sleep, I met with a psychiatrist who was one of the sleep experts and insomnia experts. And for hours, he told me about what was going on in the industry. And it's actually pretty scary. He said there are 3 neurotransmitters in the brain that research has done really well with, and they understand really well: epinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. Michael, there are over 300, possibly 400 neurotransmitters in the brain. And he was saying they've got 3 down pretty well. That's horrible in terms of messing with brain chemistry and things you can ingest that would affect your brain chemistry. So he said he does not recommend sleeping aids. His first thing as a psychiatrist for people who've got insomnia is a good cup of Cecil Seasoning's sleepy time tea. Back to melatonin for a second. There are people who take melatonin when they can't get a good night's sleep. And really what we found right now is that if it works for some people, I'm saying go with it. However, when you take in melatonin into your system, you now tell the pineal gland, shut down, we don't need you anymore. And that is not a smart thing to tell the pineal gland, or any part of the brain for that matter. So I'm not a big advocate of promoting external substances that your body can make on its own. I would rather have people learn how to re-establish that normal pathway so they can actually access their own internal pharmacy for their health and well-being. That's the way to go. However, everyone's different, and there are some people who do need some help. And I think in that case, there are some sleep aids which are very beneficial. And again, check with your doctor, and I would say do some homework. There's some sleep aids, and I'm not going to mention any names, but you'd recognize them if I did. There are some sleep aids that were people are so out of it they sleepwalk. And there's stories of people who've gone driving down the wrong way of the road, people who actually eat things which are toxic. They end up in the hospital. Some people don't survive that. What we now know with some of the sleep aids is that, and we haven't even gotten this yet, but I'll just touch briefly upon this. There are 5 stages of sleep. First stage is when you're kind of like, between consciousness and unconscious, and all the way down to REM. But we now know through some of these sleep aids that you never get to delta waves, where you need to be for this amyloid cleanup process going on with the glial cells. So again, everyone's different. Check with your doctor. Check with your sleep practitioner or your healthcare practitioner. Before that, I would say go see a good acupuncturist. So much of acupuncture deals with sleep and stress. In fact, I live in Boulder, where the joke is every third person you meet is an acupuncturist. But there's a good reason.
Or a massage therapist.
Or a massage therapist, yes. But so much. And I would also say there's 2 kinds of acupuncture. There's 5 element, which is mind, body, spirit, also called classical, and there's TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. Without getting into too much detail, because this would take some time, TCM is basically westernized acupuncture that is symptomatic relief. It may work for some people, but I'm a real big fan of classical or 5 element. 5 element is more mind, body, spirit. Mm-hmm. And the colleagues who I know who are practitioners in 5 element say that about 80% of their clientele walks in and they deal with stress. That's what they're there for, is stress. But they are known to have a good effect with insomnia. So if you have sleep problems, I would say Google classical acupuncture in your town or your local area, see who shows up, and then, like we would for any healthcare practitioner, get some references, see how well they do. But if you're having problems sleeping at night, the last thing I think you should be doing is taking sleep aids. That's the last resort. And that's what this psychiatrist said. He goes, I go through everything before I do that. But there are some physicians who all they know to do is write prescriptions, and that's their modus operandi because that's how they've been trained through the pharmaceutical companies. Caution. Danger, Will Robinson. There are other means before you go that extreme, if you have to.
And on that note, since we're already so far down the rabbit hole and we've got to start bringing it back, but on that note, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, whole classes of drugs may actually make it more difficult to sleep.
Yeah, there's a thing called SSRIs, serotonin uptake inhibitors, and there's to try and allow you to have more serotonin, which is, again, the happy hormone. And a lot of antidepressants are in this category here. And again, this is not my field, but I was kind of giving a overview here. But when you've got serotonin levels high, you're not going to have enough melatonin to get sleep. And so people who are on antidepressants have a hard time sleeping at night because of the brain chemistry situation. Yeah, it's dicey and it's complex, and I don't want to make light of it, and I sure as heck don't want to ruin anyone's day here. But I would say do your homework, and again, I'm a real big fan of, an advocate of, a holistic approach to health, which would be things like healthy eating, exercise, classical acupuncture, massage therapy, before we start going the pharmaceutical route.
Can you talk to us about the meditation route?
Yeah, boy, I'm of the opinion that everyone needs to meditate today. We live in a culture of distractions, Michael. I mean, we're being barraged with zeros and ones from every direction, every hour of the day practically. And so meditation is a way to calm the mind of all of this distraction. In fact, one of the best descriptions I ever heard of meditation is it domesticates the ego, which I think is a great expression there. And that's really what it's about. I mean, like, if you get enlightenment, great, no promises there. But really what meditation does is it calms the body and the nervous system so that you can get a clear access of your thought process. You're going to navigate your day. And so I meditate every day for about half an hour, longer if I can. And that's just sitting still. I also swim too. And of course, walking out in nature at sunrise, there's not a whole lot you can do talking to people. So you have your mind out there to project into the 4 corners of the atmosphere. But meditation basically is known as a way to calm the mind and hence the body. Lots of different ways to meditate. There's thousands. The big name right now is Mindfulness Meditation, which says to be in the present moment. And of course, all meditation would be in that category there, I suppose. But if you're in the past, you tend to be thinking about situations which can create feelings of frustration and anger. If you're in the future, there's a lot of anxiety there. The present moment is a state of stillness, and we could even say inner peace. So I'm a real big fan of meditation. I think everyone should meditate, even if it's only for 5 minutes a day, because to unplug from the world, and quite literally unplug from the world, and just focus on your breathing, that's one of the most important things. And we don't see people doing that a whole lot these days. And meditation, by the way, is not a religious activity. It's associated with almost every religion because they've seen the merits of it. But what I typically say, Michael, is you don't need to shave your head, wear an orange color robe, and go to the airport and sell flowers. That is so 20th century. In the 21st century, we need to sit still and practice and honor the art of stillness.
When we're going back, I can't believe I'm going there again, on electronics, but this is something that I see if I have a PDF to read or something, if I have some research to do on the computer, at a certain point, I can feel myself revved up is the best way to describe it. As if I've taken in too many cups of coffee, we'll say, and I'm just revved up. What can we do when our minds are revved up, maybe through meditation, that we can step back, obviously put down the electronics for a minute, and turn that dial down?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Basically, to unplug. And I would say it's really good for everyone to have a dedicated space in your house where there is no technology. I mean, the bedroom is great, but I mean, I have a meditation room where there's nothing there. I mean, it's a Zen room. There's nothing there, actually. Little joke. But I just sit quietly and gather my thoughts. And then I do have a piece of paper and pencil where I write things down if I need to actually make sense of the world there. And I can refer back to that. But the whole idea is to clear your head out of all the distractions that we have going on. And there's lots of them. So I would say what I tell people is try and find a time each day where you can sit quietly for 5 minutes. Maybe it's the bathroom. Find a place where you can do this, and then declare healthy boundaries. Tell your family, your spouses, your kids, this is my time. I do not want to be interrupted. I don't care if the world's coming to an end. I'll find out when I get out of this room. But basically, we all need to have some healthy boundaries with this. And healthy boundaries are appropriate behaviors. And we're all given these as kids from our parents. And the role of a kid is to push the boundaries to have more freedom, and the parent's responsibility is to make those boundaries strong so that they have some responsibility to them. There's three kinds of behavior in general terms. There's passive, where you get walked over. There's aggressive, those people doing the walking over, and there's assertive. An assertive person actually declares a healthy boundary, do not enter, where they can, in this case here, sit quietly, focus on their breathing, and just calm themselves down. So we need some willpower, and that means the willpower to turn off the devices, if you will. One of my healthy boundaries is, Michael, I don't turn the Wi-Fi router on until after I get done meditating. I don't want to enter that world until I'm ready. And meditation gives me the calmness where once I do turn the world, I can see, okay, now I'm ready for this. So my routine is I get up in the morning, walk the dog, come back, take a shower, and then I sit quietly for half an hour and just focus my breathing. I do a little bit of visualization, and then after breakfast, I take a look at the world through social media and emails and stuff like that. And I would recommend everyone to have a nice routine. That's kind of like some guidelines that you can live by to help you with this. And yeah, it's tough at first. There's always someone says, "Oh, I have one exception. I got an important phone call coming in." But Michael, you and I grew up when we didn't have this stuff, so we know you can still exist without it. And that's the message, that we need to have healthy boundaries, times away from this stuff, so that we can think clearly. Because by not having that, we become a victim of our own consequences.
Speaking about healthy boundaries and talking about routines, maybe you can tell us about an evening routine or about your evening routine and how we can unwind and purge the mind before we sleep.
Yeah, it was a great concept called a media curfew. And basically what it says is turn off all this stuff 2 hours before you go to bed, because your pineal gland needs about 2 hours to kind of rev up with the light and the temperatures and things like that to get enough melatonin where you're ready to fall asleep when you hit the pillow. You don't want to be tossing and turning for an hour once you go to bed. And so my routine is I take the dog out for a walk, let him do his thing. Sometimes I just put him out in the backyard, turn off all the lights, turn off the heat if it's on, turn off the Wi-Fi router, and then I crawl to bed and just I don't count sheep, but I suppose I could, something like that. But really, basically, it's a way of kind of like just slowing things down before I even get to the bedroom, so that when I'm there, it's just a nice, quiet, healthy environment for sleep ambience.
A lot of people talk about wanting TV. TV is a couple to unwind. And from a dopamine response, that's not what's going on. But what about sitting together? Something Jessica and I have started doing with baby books and reading a book together.
That's a great idea. I'm a real big fan of that. One reason why TV is not quite the relaxation pill people think it is. Back in the 70s, when they introduced the remote control, people actually could no longer have to get up off their butt and go change a channel. They could just click a switch. And TV producers and movie producers realized that to keep your attention, because they were hounded by the advertisers, they had to have quicker scenes and a lot more motion. And so you take a look at scenes right now, TV right now, and it's go, 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 go. Sometimes even if there's nothing going on, they move the camera to kind of get this sense of, well, I need to keep on this. What they've taught people is to engage in the stress response watching television at a very low level, but they're still engaged in the stress response. So I don't want to knock TV. There's some really good stuff on it. I don't have a TV, but I've heard of Game of Thrones. I've heard of Downton Abbey. I know that's gone by now, but there's some of my friends are really into Outlander. So there's some good stuff out there. We don't want to deny that. But again, healthy boundaries must prevail. So yeah, sitting quietly. We've lost that whole art of talking to our family members without shouting or something. I meant to mention this too. Probably the most important thing I can say in this time period together is that the two biggest stressors we're seeing right now, Michael, are alienation and isolation. And those perpetuate even more stress. So having time to sit quietly with your spouse, with your kids, no devices at the dinner table is a great idea.
We're seeing, I believe, and I could be wrong, but it seems like it's a pattern that repeated about a century ago, a huge uptick in suicides right now, which I have to believe is from alienation and isolation. How can we help? Let's say, how can we help our kids with it? Because social media, and going back to the ego, does not, as a general rule, make us feel more connected.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think parents have to realize that their role with kids is to guide them through the process here. And they're not their best friends. They're their parents. And so you got to have strict rules. I can recall growing up, I thought to myself, when I get to be a parent, I'm never going to have this with my kids. But then as I got older, I'll be like, oh, now I know why they did this. This is brilliant. I do the same thing myself. So yeah, I mean, it's not the job of the parent to be the kid's best friend. Otherwise, you're going to have complete dysfunction and codependency and God knows what else. Years of therapy, probably. It really is a good idea to establish, again, healthy boundaries with the children and with themselves, too, because you're modeling behavior. When you see a parent at a restaurant looking at their device and the kid off wondering, what the hell's going on, that kid is learning from modeling that's more important than the kid is.
Thank you. What does it mean to you to stand like mountain, flow like water?
Wow. Well, first I got to tell you where I got that expression, that proverb. I was teaching at the University of Maryland, going to graduate school, and I had a student who said to me after the first week of class in stress management, he said, "Everything you're talking about, I've already heard before." This kid didn't even shave. I'm like, no way. But I didn't say that. I said, really? I said, where'd you hear this all? And he goes, in my Tai Chi class. And I said, oh, Tai Chi. Yeah, it's all about balance, which is what I was teaching. And he goes, I came across a proverb I thought you might want to know about. And I said, sure, what is it? He said this: stand like mountain, flow like water. When I heard that, Michael, I got goosebumps. Because to stand like mountain means to be secure, to be strong in your environment in the winds of change. And we got lots of winds right now. But to flow like water means to go with the flow with the things you can't control. And I've discovered every culture has a similar proverb. The Chinese just kind of narrowed it down to 6 words. But the American version is the Serenity Prayer, which a lot of people may know, that says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that, by the way, is the best stress management program I've ever heard wrapped up in 27 words. So when I heard this, I thought to myself, God, that's magical. And it turns out I ended up using it for a book title, which I'm very grateful for. But that's what it means to me is to be balanced, to live your life balanced. And that's what I teach when I teach stress management. I mean, it's balance is so important. It's inherent in our condition. We strive for it. Kids don't crawl around on all fours forever. At some point they stand up and say, hey, I'm ready to go explore the world. So balance is essential, but too much of any one thing can throw us out of balance. And we need to learn to regain a sense of balance, also known as homeostasis or inner peace.
Perfect. So on that note, what one homework assignment, if I take off my coaching hat and I put it on you, Luke, today, what one homework assignment would you give people to take to action on to find more balance today or to help them sleep?
Right now, the word is healthy boundaries. Establish a healthy boundary with one area in your life. It could be eating habits. It could be technology habits. It could be television habits. It could be financial habits. It could be even relationships. But find one area in your life that you want to pull the reins in so you're not a welcome mat being walked all over, and then claim victimization. And Michael, when you hear people who are what I call is doing BMW, stands for bitch, moan, and whine, that's victimization.
Thank you. On that note, on the victimization note, segueing from there back to parents and their kids, Jessica always wants me to ask a question for parents and their kids. Since we've talked about electronics a lot, and we didn't mean to, but we ended up picking on electronics a lot today, or maybe we did. But with that said, what can we tell parents to help them with their kids?
I would say again, healthy boundaries. I would say immediate curfew. At some point, maybe like 7:30, just take the technology away from the kids and say you get this tomorrow morning. But right now, you're done for the night because sleep is that essential. And again, notice we came back to sleep here. I think a lot of kids know how to manipulate their parents. That's their role in life. They one occupation, but don't bend. Don't buy that. The technology basically gets. I would put it in a safe every night so that no one can get to it. I mean, that will lock it up or so. It's that important.
Thank you. What personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Boy, I have a lot of those, but right now I'd have to say nature. I mean, I chose to live in Colorado back in 1993, and my joke is I'm not leaving now, even in a pine box. I love the mountains. I love nature. I get out there with my camera, take some pictures. And by the way, I love the picture behind you. I took that picture when I was down in Patagonia when I was making my movie Earth Songs. The Torres del Paine National Park is just stunning. But mountains take my breath away. And there's something about looking at something in nature that makes you feel as if you're not the world's not all about you. You're part of something much, much bigger. So what gives me the Yahoo effect is the mountains, the beauty. This time of year is gorgeous with the leaves changing, although most are gone by now. I just came from Vermont and they hadn't all changed there, so it's pretty cool going back in time after seeing change of leaves and then go back there and see some more of it. I'm a big fan of nature. Last night I was walking my dog and a gray horned owl flew right over my head. How cool is that? I was walking my dog a couple of mornings ago and a bald eagle flew over my head. I think he seemed to be attracting birds of prey. I'm sure there's a great message there. But nature is what right now I would say makes me feel closest to the divine.
Beautiful, beautiful. So on that note, where can people go to find your beautiful books and to find your documentary? If you want nature, check out Earth Songs to find that and to find out more.
Yeah, thanks. I have all this stuff on my website. I know it sounds kind of tacky, but my website is my name, brianlukeseaward.net. I think also .com works. Down there, you'll see a page that says store. And so I have my books available there. And I'm working on a sequel to Earth Songs, Michael. I'm doing Earth Songs 2 and hope to have that ready sometime next spring. But yeah, so there's lots of books. There's some light ones. So there's some physiology heavy books. I got a few textbooks as well. But if they have an interest, brianlukeseaward.net or .com, BrianLuke, and my last name is spelled Seaward.
And if you didn't catch Brian Luke-Seward, Seaward.net. If you didn't catch BrianLukeSeward.net, come on over to Inspire Nation Show. We'll get you over to BrianLukeSeward.net. Brian, this has been phenomenal, and I definitely want to check out Earth Songs 2, and I'm certainly going to want to have you back on in the future to talk about Stand Like Mountain, Flow Like Water. before we dive into a brief meditation, any last words of wisdom you want to share with people?
Michael, I just want to say that I love your show, and I think that what you're doing is great, trying to help raise consciousness. That's what I feel my role on planet Earth is too, is basically move from a motivation of fear to a motivation of love. And information and wisdom, like the people you have on your show, is part of that process to help raise consciousness. And I'm tickled pink to be a guest on your show. So thank you for doing that. And I would tell everyone the same thing, that when you find yourself getting afraid, think to yourself, how can I move out of fear into love and compassion? Because that is where we're going as a species. I know it looks like it's a rough ride right now, but I have it on good authority that that's where things are shifting to. And we're all part of that process.
Woohoo! Thank you so much, Brian. I love you, man. I love you.
Thanks. Likewise, love you too. Thanks, Michael.
Do you have a brief meditation you wouldn't mind sharing with people?
Sure. I normally say close your eyes, but if you listen to this and driving, do not do that part of it. But I say just kind of focus on your breathing to begin with. Mm-hmm. Feel the air come into your nose or mouth, down into your lungs, but allow your stomach to extend out nice and slowly. This is actually the most relaxing way to breathe, not with our upper chest, but our lower stomach, often called abdominal breathing or belly breathing. And by the way, this is how you breathe when you're asleep at night, because when you sleep at night, you don't care how you look. I would ask everyone right now to think of a symbol of relaxation. Think of a symbol, because we often talk about positive affirmations to try and relax the mind and body, but so much of communication is nonverbal. And so we find now, and I'm a big fan of the work of Carl Jung, that archetypal symbols have a very pronounced effect for relaxation. So think to yourself, what's a symbol of relaxation for you? And so I have my eyes closed. If you want, go ahead and close your eyes. And as you focus on your breathing, think of an image. And for me, an image might be a mountain lake that is so still, it reflects the trees and the snow-capped mountains around it. But for some people, they've told me that their image of relaxation is a rainbow in the afternoon sky. And some people, for them, their image of relaxation is sitting on a beach all by themselves, hearing the waves come across the sand as it breaks on the shore. And yet one more person told me that their image of relaxation is looking at the morning dew on rose petals. So there's no shortage of images for relaxation, but find one that's very important and very significant to you. And I would say make a habit as you sit here and just think to yourself about your breathing to call that image into your mind's eye just for a few moments every day, and just allow it to come into center so that you feel a sense of groundedness. You don't feel like you're being knocked over by the winds of change. And so take a nice slow deep breath, and as you exhale, think of the phrase, my body is calm and relaxed. My body is calm and relaxed. And as you say that to yourself, see that image in your mind's eye, that archetypal symbol of relaxation. And now take a very, very slow deep breath, even slower and deeper than last time. And as you exhale, think to yourself now to allow this image to fade from your mind, but retain the sense of relaxation that it provides for you all the way down into the center of your being. And in a moment, we're going to allow you to open your eyes and bring yourself back into the physical awareness of your body. But just think to yourself that you want to commit to a time every day to sit quietly and relax, to sit quietly and come to that place of stillness. Michael, every sacred scripture on the planet talks about the idea of stillness, whether it's the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita or the Tao Te Ching. They all speak about this importance of stillness. And so it's okay to be still every now and then and just sit quietly, even if it's only for 5 minutes a day. So now feel free to open your eyes to a soft gaze in front of you. We could have gone longer, but we'll leave it at that for now. And then just bring yourself into your awareness of your body. If you want, you can wiggle your fingers and toes. And from there, we'll bring a smile to our face and say thanks. Namaste.
Namaste. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Luke. This has been beautiful. This has been a treat. We have gone on so many amazing tangents. I have loved every single one of them. And you just brought it all back home. So thank you so, so much.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks, Michael. Well, listen, it's great to see you. I look forward to crossing paths in person sometime soon. And thanks for being a bright light in the planet. And let's do this again sometime, okay?
Absolutely. And we have got to get you back out here next summer for the hummingbirds, if not for the baby as well. But it's specifically for the hummingbirds.
Let's do the hummingbirds for sure.
Awesome. Gotta crank it back up for the finish here. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get stand like mountain, flow like water, and begin de-stressing, unplugging, and sleeping better today, and shine bright. Woohoo!
Shine on. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you so, so much, Luke. This was awesome.
Hey, it sure was. Boy, it just flew by too, huh?
It did. I actually let us run just a little bit over because you were doing like the TV thing. You were keeping us hooked. It was the next thing and the next thing. Continuous, action-oriented, drawing us in.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it. Likewise. All right, let's stay in touch. I will talk to you soon. Have a great day, and may the force be with you.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!